Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of DTV, the Digital Transformation Channel. Today we have the CEO of Scalyr with us, Steve Newman. Welcome, Steve, to DTV.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, Steve, I was reading a little bit about your background and noticed that you've been coding since the age of 8. That's just fascinating. But you've been involved with both startups and large multinational organizations. Where's a lot of this, innovation mainly coming from? Where did it stem from? And what are some of the, high points in your journey that you might want to share with us on DTV?
So it's an interesting question. Where's the innovation coming from between the startups and the big companies? And there's some of both. I think there's some startups really have a natural advantage. Lots of obvious reasons. Easier to take risks. You tend to get more creativity. Mm-hmm. But that's not the only piece of the story. You look at things like the big cloud platforms today. Those all came out of big companies. They weren't acquisitions the way a lot of the innovation of big companies stems from. Those were more natively homegrown because you need a real scale platform to do something like that. And I think those are the kinds of innovations that you tend to see out of larger companies when there's just no way to do it other than at scale. But that's not where most innovation comes from. And so then if you look, for example, at all these myriad applications that people are building on top of the cloud, that's entirely coming out of startups because
right.
Once you have a cloud available to you, that takes a lot of the need for scale away.
Right. And tell us a little bit about Scalyr. What do you guys do? What's your value proposition?
So at Scalyr, we're a hosted log management service. So our customers are engineering teams. We take in the logs from their applications and systems and give them access to those logs, ability to analyze that, to understand what's going on in their applications and their systems. Mm-hmm. And I think what I like to think is interesting about what we're building is that we make this, it's a very technical problem, and even though our customers are engineers and they're ready for technical problems, especially with the move to DevOps, you have a lot of people who are using these tools who are responsible for tracking down production problems, for debugging applications, for whom that's just the side part of their job. Their real job is to create the application, to write the code, but they get called in to also make sure it's working well and to track down problems. We try to really make that part of the job more accessible so that they're able to get in, solve the problem, and get back out again.
Right. And with regards to the DevOps community, how mature do you think that they've become over the years? And are there still critical issues that need to be addressed? And what are some of those in your experience?
There's definitely a level of maturation that's happening in DevOps. In particular, it's become very widespread now. It's I think in a lot of communities it's almost the default. You wouldn't even almost bother to mention that you're using DevOps because of course you would be.
Right.
And so a lot of the kind of early maturation steps have taken place, but these things always take a long time to really settle in. And I think where a lot of kind of the maturity frontier falls now is around the tools, is around, everyone has bought into the idea of DevOps, the idea that we should not have a barrier between development and operations, that the people who are creating these applications should be direct participants in making sure that the applications are working well. But I think we're still coming to terms with this, the fact that means that operations is now mixed into a job rather than being the heart of a job. And how do we enable these people who dip in and out of operations to be able to do that effectively, even though that's not their only focus? And what do we need to do to simplify that job so that you can do the operations as part of a larger role effectively?
You mentioned how applications are working or making sure that they're working well, and InfoStretch, a part of what we're focusing on, or a large part of what we're focusing on, or have been focusing on, is testing. And so that, is becoming more and more a part of DevOps. And how do you see that panning out? Do you see QA becoming part of the testing organization? Do you see automation also playing a much bigger role when it comes to that? And who's really overseeing the testing process?
So the role of QA in the digital era and with the rise of DevOps is an interesting one. And I think this is a great question because there's not really a boundary ultimately between QA and operations. They're both about making sure things work correctly. The software life cycle starts with someone writing code. There will be flaws in that code, and those flaws become apparent at different points while it's still being developed, during perhaps a testing cycle, after it's gone out into production and people are actually using it. And the goal is always to find those problems as early as possible. We all know that the sooner you find a bug, the less damage it causes. But the goal is also to reduce the friction that enables. Of course, the old waterfall, software delivery models, you have this long testing phase before anyone gets to use a new piece of code, and that made things very slow. And many of the overarching trends of the last few decades, from online software delivery to continuous integration to DevOps, these are all about tightening the loop, getting software out in front of users faster. And so, and yet we can't afford to lower the quality bar. In fact, I think the bar nowadays, maybe in the early stages of the web, there was a lot of tolerance for glitches, but those days are gone. So We're now in a world where velocity is critical and quality is also critical. And so, so now you have these very challenging questions of how do you optimize for both of those things at the same time. And that DevOps is one part of that, erasing the barrier between the team that creates the application and the team that is responsible for making sure it's working well in production. QA is the team that's responsible for making sure that it's working well before production. We also need to bring that closer to the developers.
Yeah, and we were I've been talking to a number of people on DTV, and it seems that also automation is becoming a lot more prevalent, and especially also with some of our customers in playing a role in QA, where manual testing is now sort of seen as the old school thing to do, and maybe frowned upon. Do you have any perspective on that?
I definitely see a move from manual QA toward automated testing. In fact, we're just in the last stages of that transformation internally at Scalyr, and the reason is it all comes down to the increasing velocity of software delivery. When you're delivering software continuously, there's no room in that process for a manual QA cycle. Automated testing is one way to address that, and almost the only way in terms of finding problems before they're going to reach a user. Right.
And so as I might have mentioned to you earlier, one of the goals we have on DTV is to shed some light on different interpretations of digital transformation, and DevOps being a fundamental part of this digital transformation era. But I guess looking at digital transformation as a whole, what is your sense as to where the drive is coming from today?
I really think the digital transformation is being driven by lines of business, and it's because this is where the competitive frontier is today.
Right.
And especially as the transformation goes, more and more broad and deep across the entire economy. The early stages of the digital transformation, it was about processes that were already information-based. A book was information; it went from paper to an e-book. A newspaper moves online;
right.
It was still information. But we're now at the stage where, with everything from ride sharing and delivery and outsourcing and all of the virtualization of everything in the world, this is the digital transformation messily embedding itself into all of the real-world parts of the economy. So it's creating competitive advantages and competitive pressures across every industry, and that directly creates the pressure within the line of business to respond and hopefully get out in front.
What are some of the most compelling or exciting applications of DevOps that you've seen as of late?
I think one of the really interesting things that DevOps is giving us, and it's very broad-based, is that the development teams, the people who are creating software and applications, have a lot more ownership of the entire experience of that software, not just what function I'm maybe able to build in, but how does that play out for a customer or a user? What performance are they experiencing? Does it actually work 100% of the time? And and how can we optimize that and make it work well at scale? There used to be that barrier which created a friction in development, but also limited the scope to which the developer was able to feel ownership. And so I think just across the field, people are able to push the boundaries a little bit more, create something that works more smoothly, works a little bit faster, gets a little bit more ambitious in what it's going to be able to deliver, because the developer is able to think about that entire picture rather than just their little thing that's going to get thrown over the wall and put into a box.
Right. No, that's definitely the case, and especially in this day and age. So, great. Well, Steve, thank you so much for this is very insightful. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hopefully doing a part 2 of this interview. We appreciate your feedback for DTV. And ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this episode of the Digital Transformation Channel. Thank you all for joining.
I want